Welcome to Self Perfected.
All right. Cool. Hey,
Hey, everybody.
What's
Hey.
up?
What's up, everybody?
It's another week. We're still here.
Another day, another dollar.
I was I guess there's a few things we could talk about. Christina and I were talking about last night about the history of mankind. I don't know. Do you remember how we got on the subject, Christine? About like how Christine was asking me about firmament for some reason. She's like, hey, how would you define firmament? And I was like, the sky, like the ceiling almost, but like a sky, like you could push on it. That's the way I had defined it. And she read a definition and it said the sky and as something tangible, usually referred to as something tangible, right? And I was like, that's why I was thinking something you can push on. And it kind of reminded me of like when I read Snow Crash, they had a story in there of Babel being this actual tower. And then the part where it goes to heaven, that when they discovered this tower, the ceiling was painted as the sky, right? And we got to talking about like different stories like that. And then
See, Neil Stevenson was trying to tell everybody.
oh, Asif's here.
He was trying to tell everybody the truth
What's that?
about the firmament.
Oh, yeah. It's just the ceiling of this
Asif
But
hopping
then-
in is like flashback to when you guys used to do the podcast, and then people would just like join in. Like, do you guys remember that? The first
Did
couple
that used to
episodes. Yeah.
Guys, where's Asif? I see this Calvin Klein model over here. I don't know who this guy is.
What? Well, I'm glad.
He's
I'm
pretty
glad.
handsome. I saw him
glad-
yesterday in person.
How are you feeling?
pretty great.
Okay,
I'm
good.
I'm just glad Christine's here because I don't think my my voice can handle it. So you'll be chiming in heavy.
I think
fact,
4 is a good
Christine,
number
you
for
know
a
what?
podcast.
You know, Christine, why don't you lead this one? Whatever you want to talk about. You
Oh,
do
we
we,
it.
ju- we started
We
without
already
you.
started. We're already live.
But I mean, wherever you got, I know I can see it, but wherever you
Okay.
guys are at, I just say, fuck it. Let's just let Christine monologue. for
Asif
like-
comes on in the middle of a conversation. He goes, "Hey, you guys, I'm here, but go ahead. You talk about what you want to talk about." We're like, okay.
It's so
Sure.
funny.
Hey, you guys are the one that stopped the conversation.
We were talking about the
I was gonna
firmament.
be bird on the wall. Or
Okay.
fly on the wall. Fly on the
Actually,
wall.
I think
bird on the
Asif was
leg.
watching the live and he was like, "Oh shit, they're talking about the firmament. I need to get on there."
That's what it was.
happened.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
what happened.
Okay, good. Catch me up and keep it rolling.
But yeah, like
Firmament.
it's interesting because like in that story it's the ceiling of a tower, and ciel or ceiling is like the same root word. Like in Spanish, ciel is sky, right? And so we got to talking about that, and then we started talking about different creation stories and how like now I really appreciate going through the mankind, the Destiny series, History of Mankind on YouTube. I can really appreciate it because I don't have to subscribe to what I was told as a child and like basically forced to believe like this is it, this is how things work. And also realizing that like a lot of those stories are basically designed to make you accept whatever's already going on. Like even the stories that I heard that were outside of outside of the canon, so to speak, of like the regular religions or creation stories or whatever, they were still designed. Like I remember reading some story about like, I don't remember what the group was, but it was some offshoot of like Freemasonry or Illuminati or something like that, some sort of secret society like that. And their creation story was that the God that we know was just one of many gods, and he invited some other god, Lucifer, to help him with his creation of man, and that and Lucifer had an idea of like, you have to give man free will, and our God did not like that, and so
So he didn't.
so so Lucifer still gave man free will, and then God enslaved Lucifer to earth, and all this whole story, right, to like describe why we think of Lucifer as bad and all this, right? And then at the end, it was like the whole story
Wait,
was to get
so
you to accept
Okay. Yeah.
contrast, to get you to accept that it's okay to have contrast. So it's still at the very end, it was just like, basically, you're not taking any responsibility. And that's really what I was sharing with Christina, like what I appreciate about the Destiny material. You don't have to believe it, because at the end of the day, it's all about you taking as much responsibility for your life, for this world, for everything. You have to take responsibility. You can't rely on, oh, there's some benevolent God who's gonna help us out and
Yeah.
do everything for us. Like, no, like that,
No.
no, stop believing in that shit, right?
The cool thing about, oh, go ahead, Asa.
I want to get your perspective on this because I think we've all heard this a lot. It's like, to me, it's so like obvious. But I'm curious, like the other side, like what you guys think would be the arguments to this. Is like people think that because they're getting information from really high level secret societies, say it's all true, right? And people actually get access to information through, certain relationships or whatever from Freemasons, like the highest Freemasons or different organizations like that, right? And they tout it as if it's like, this is how we're going to change the world. Like, this is what we need to do to change this world. But it's coming from the people that created the world as it is today. Like,
Apparently, yeah.
like exactly, but like let's just consider it to be right coming from that, right? It's like, so wait, your idea of being able to change things and understand how reality truly works is to follow the people and do exactly what is said from the people who like totally enslaved all of mankind.
Yeah, it's like, why would you trust them, first of all, and then why would you listen to them, second of all? And you know what it is, though? The person actually doesn't care about changing the world. It's just it's like Bernard addresses this point in his blog. I forget where, but that point about, everyone says, when I make a lot of money, then I'll make a difference. It's like this like pact with the devil you make or something, and it's just that. It's really what they want is they want to be like the Illuminati, Freemasons, whoever. They have this fantasy. And they're like, if I can learn that, yeah, I'm gonna use it to like make a difference. And it's like,
but you notice how as you go higher and higher and higher, it's about not being absolute specifically. It's about like as you go higher and higher, it becomes more specifically about there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad.
yeah.
Also,
no, I understand the good perspective of that, right? Is like you're not judging everything for like some kind of value point. Right, you're evaluating it based off its consequences, but that's not it.
Yeah.
It's like there's no good or bad. As you go higher, it's like, oh, now I see how it works up here.
So literally now you can justify anything.
Exactly.
You can justify keeping the system as is and even lying to everybody else about everything.
Yeah.
It's the same relationship of like, when I make a lot of money, I will change the world. I'm going to do all these things. It's the same thing that like as a child, when I become an adult, I'm going to let my kids do this. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that, and then you become exactly the same as your parents.
Right.
And you do the same abuse and all that. But like we should really be aware, like nothing fucking changes. It's always the same because that's what we accept. Like even within our own minds where we're like, oh, I'm going to do all these great things, but you're not changing. For one, you're not changing your programming. And for two, you're not being aware of just how much influence the programmer, so to speak, has over you. Like in this case, the programmer would be your parents, right? But also the secret society or whatever. They're the programmer. They're the ones influencing. Oh, Christine, bring up that point that you said about Mayor's post about the Tesla.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw, Mayor had posted, he's been posting about his car lately. And then one of the last posts he did was he was going through the drive-through at Carl Jr.'s or something.
No, it was Canes.
Oh,
Raising Cane's.
was it Cane's?
It was Canes.
If it wasn't, I would
know.
have discarded the post. But that's what caught my attention.
Okay, sorry. Excuse me, it was Cane's.
I would never eat at Carl's Jr., by the way.
I don't know. To me, it's probably like the same thing. But anyways, the lady at the drive-through had said,
Christine has
"Oh,
been removed from the.
You
How
know
do I
what's
mute her?
one of my
on
students
second thought."
went to Canes, or he went to like the West Coast. I think he went to Arizona, and he said, "I went to Canes. Man, I was trying to take that sauce home. Like I've never had anything like that.
So
It's
good.
pretty funny." Yeah.
Is it better than Chick-fil-A sauce?
Drake
Way
has
better.
never taken me to Cane's Cam, and
There's
I
no
s-
Canes
was-
here.
I know.
Okay.
When we were in
Oh,
we were
really?
in Houston, and you deliberately did not want to go.
Will you
I
guys come
asked.
down in November?
We'll go to
Okay.
Cane's.
There's one in Longview, which is about 45 minutes from here.
Book out the restaurant.
it's a
We'll do a
Fast
party at
food.
Cane's. We'll just be like slinging sauce everywhere. Like you know, they pop bottles of champagne. We'll have a VIP section and they'll just be like popping sauce.
that's how they treat McDonald's in Dominican Republic. Like if you are a kid and you're like all I want for my birthday is to go to McDonald's. Like that is such a huge accomplishment. If you can go to McDonald's for your birthday in Dominican Republic, it's just like, yeah, McDonald's. Like champagne's popping. It is like legit like that, just so you know.
That's crazy. So
anyways,
yes.
so the lady through the drive-through saw Mayor's car and was like, "Hey, you're driving my dream car. Like, wow, that's amazing." And Mayor then elaborated that he gets comments like that a lot of people saying like, "Oh my God, you're driving my dream car," and people will come up to him and say, "Hey man, nice car." And it was just funny because I was telling Drake, I'm like, it's so weird because first of all, it's an electric car. It's like something like that's being so commercialized in the sense of, now this like new World Economic Forum, it's like we're trying to go to this like electric car thing. But then also it's like you've just been impulsed and marketed so well that now you're like, oh, this is now my dream car. Like back before it used to be like, Ferraris or Lamborghinis, you know what I mean? Like something of that
Yeah, I see what you're
nature.
saying. Like,
but
why does
it's
everybody suddenly want that
a
car?
Tesla?
Gas
Like it-
guzzlers.
yeah.
That's what it used to be.
Like,
and they're
so
not
sad.
even good. And the funny thing is, like I was telling Drake, I'm like, they're not even good cars. Like from what I've heard, every single model of the Tesla has been recalled.
Elon Musk has
it's-
removed you from Twitter. You're just like, no.
So it's just crazy. I'm like,
Well,
you're
I
just
will
the-
say
hardest
this.
to get
I will say this in Mayor's defense. I drove it.
It is pretty cool.
they're fucking cool to drive, but he had to go like to a whole nother city, just charge it.
Right.
So, one could argue, well, if we had more charging stations and all this stuff, but it's like, so there's no way you can do that with solar power and shit and like wind farms. It's just like, anyways, that's a whole other topic, but yeah, it is people being impulsed for sure in
Right.
marketing.
That's the main point. Is just like how many
But-
people have this.
But think about
dream?
this. Also, I think a huge component of it was they right off the bat made them super fucking expensive, compared to the average car.
Right.
So it was exclusive from the beginning. It was like, nah, you can't afford this.
It's almost
So
like
everyone was like, I
Apple.
want that.
yeah.
It's like Mercedes, BMW. How many people who want a BMW or want a Mercedes have ever actually driven one?
No.
And I'm not saying they're bad cars. I'm just saying, like, you don't even know what it is. Like, how many people want a Ferrari and you've never driven one?
Right.
Or even sat in one, most likely. And they want it. It's like, why do you want it? Remember I sent you that picture of that rifle that I bought, Drake? You there?
Wait, what? What'd you say?
You there? That rifle I sent you, that picture of that
Oh,
rifle. I bought.
yeah.
Right. And then I started looking up like how do you disassemble it? Because I've never had a rifle like exactly like that. And then they were talking about you have to like break in the barrel and like all this whole process. And I was like, what the fuck? I have to do like all this extra, it's like extra shit compared to what you would normally do with a new
Right.
rifle. You would just clean it and then shoot it, right?
Right.
And there's this whole debate of whether you actually need to do all that stuff or not. But my point is, it's like you think you want something, you don't even know what the actual mechanics of it are. It's just an image. It's just a something of an impulse to it. You don't even really know what goes into it.
Yeah.
Same thing with canes. Everybody wants canes now, and you don't even know. You don't know what it is. It could be terrible, but it's not. It's good. Let me put it this way. Chick-fil-A sauce, it's kind of like a Dijon, sort of a creamy flavor, right? Cane sauce is
Mhm.
more of like a it's not spicy, but it's got more of a peppery
Ooh,
flavor. And
spice.
it's like if you could get the best of ranch dressing, but it doesn't taste like ranch dressing. But if you could get the best of that and Chick-fil-A sauce and a little bit of peppery flavor, if you get all that just right, that would be Chick-fil-A sauce. It's probably just
And-
ranch
Wow.
with ketchup in
And
it.
this episode is brought to you by Canes.
The chicken tenders, they're juicy. They're just it's great, and you just can't stop eating it. And they give you these big pieces of toast, Texas toast.
Can you order this cane sauce? Or Cameron, can you make this cane sauce? I'm Googling it
I
right now.
haven't tried to. Because the kids don't care, but they like Chick-fil-A sauce, so they always ask me to make Chick-fil-A sauce. So we have figured out how to make that.
That's what the honey
Pretty-
and the ketchup and
Pretty close. Yeah, and the thing we were getting wrong the whole time was we weren't putting Dijon, or we weren't putting mustard in. You have to put a little bit of mustard in the Chick-fil-A sauce, and that makes it taste just like, because we weren't getting I would put barbecue sauce, mayonnaise, and a little bit of honey, which the kids liked it. But then if you put a little bit of mustard, it makes it like just like Chick-fil-A.
that's what I want.
So there's
So
that. I don't know how to make cane sauce. Problem with that stuff is there's so much like additives and weird shit in it, especially if you were to go buy, because like they sell Chick-fil-A sauce at the store now,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
it's
it's got so many
terrible, though.
preservatives, and it's probably the same shit as what they sell at the store, but it's just so bad for you. So
Yeah.
we don't like have that at home where the kids can, so we just make it ourselves. It's like, I think it's kind of decent.
Yeah.
We actually care what our kids eat. So how did we get on that topic? We were talking about the firmament.
We were talking about the firmament.
Talking about the firmament.
So what is the firmament?
Oh,
It's the dome. It's like the sky.
Yeah.
But in like a long time ago, they believed that it was literally a dome that was
Oh,
like
okay.
over the earth.
Makes
Oh,
sense.
and by the way, remember that book I was telling you about that I've been reading, those iRobot books?
Yeah.
On Earth, they live under these domes.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simpsons. Remember the
I-
Simpsons movie?
I guess
No.
No.
I the way that I had gotten to History of Mankind from firmament was because we were looking at images, and we were looking at, how they say separates the waters from the waters.
Cane sauce
And
gives
so-
me a firmament.
Okay. Muted.
It makes my
Um,
Tower of Babel rise to the heavens.
removed. But yeah, it, like, how they say the firmament separates the waters from the waters, and we were looking at all these different images, like pictures that people had created.
No, hold on. Literally in Greek, they had like, or whatever language, they had like two different words for waters and waters, but they could only translate them both as waters. But it was like totally different words, and they were just like,
Yeah.
translated. They separate the waters from the waters.
Exactly.
And they're like, yeah, that'll make perfect sense later.
So that's what I was
I
saying. to
actually,
Christine.
yeah, bring up
She's
this
like-
point, Jake, about like the waters and the waters.
Yeah, so that's basically what I was saying to Christine, is like, obviously these are images that people created based on their interpretation of what they read, right? But like, what would we describe as like waters and separating waters from waters? And then I was just like, well, if you listen to the History of Mankind series, it's like, what was Earth? It was like this sound planet of water, essentially, right? And so like separating the waters of like another dimension from the physical manifestation of the waters of Earth, something to that effect, right?
There is actual water in the air.
What? Hydrogen.
There's water in the
oxygen,
air.
Yeah.
No, I mean straight up just water.
Moisture.
I know I have a dehumidifier in my barn.
Right.
And like every day, because one of them I have has a pump, and then I have one in one room that doesn't have a pump, and I have to empty it out every day till I put a pump in it. And like every day I go out there, and it's like a bucket, like, I don't
Yeah,
know how
yeah.
many
It's a
gallons,
lot.
a few gallons or whatever. And I
Yeah.
like have to dump it out. And I'm like, that literally came from the air.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's
It's like
crazy
one of
if you
those
think
too.
about it.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of land.
Land?
Separates water from water.
Oh, land.
Land.
Well, that's not firm.
It's firm as fuck, dude.
Makes sense.
So you're saying the sky is really just land?
So wait, what's the context of the word firmament? And
It's like the sky.
Yeah, it's
It
the sky.
separates.
but
It separates the
with
earth
what-
from the
How did we
stars,
get
from the
there?
space.
like, where is it saying that it separates the waters from the
In
water?
Genesis.
Yeah, in the Bible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
the
know.
creation part of the it's literally the second verse of like the creation, 7 days of creation. It's like, and on the second day, God created the firmament.
I like
Oh,
how they
And
call them
that's-
verses, like it's a fucking rap song.
And on the
What?
first day,
Yo, God dropped the
There is a
meat
song like that.
verse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that would be a good one. That would be a good one.
You
7
know
days
what's
of
weird though?
creation.
How we look at like these creation myths and they seem so primitive to us, but like evolution and like the way what you're taught in school is literally just our creation myth. And like
Yeah.
the Big Bang and everything, it's just literally our myth. And we're like, no, but it's got science in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You literally think the same way about your creation myth that everybody else back then thought about theirs. Like they're like, no, but it's this or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's all
But-
just someone's idea about something that's been propagandized.
It's pretty hilarious what people take. Like that's why I wanted Christina to bring up that point of like how many people think of this car as their dream car, and clearly it's just been marketed to you really effectively, you know. And in the same way with like all the information that we take in has just been marketed in a sense really effectively to the point where we just believe it as fact. We believe that this is our dream car. We believe that this is how things operate and run. This is like what's going on in actuality, in fact, in the world. And there was a point that I was listening to The Soul of Money, and there's a point of how we preoccupy ourselves with all this information. We're so preoccupied that we're not able to consider how we've created ourselves to be this personality, how we've created, you know, beyond that, just beyond our personality, what we're participating in to create this world, to create this system, to keep it going the way that it is. And, you know, just with the context of all of that, it's like we're really accepting like a really surface level of what we call life. And it's really just, it's almost like watching a movie and like, you know how you'll get really immersed into a movie and like, you know, you can like, oh, like it gets you emotional. It gets you like, wow, like this is amazing, great, whatever, right? But then like believing that to be fact and continuing on your entire life, just like, nope, that was real. And then never actually considering what goes into making a movie. Like, you know, you had to go into a theater to watch this movie and they had to pay this theater to have their movie or whatever it was. And they had to pay the actors and they had to like get a camera together. There's so much complexity behind what goes into making this. And then all we participate in is the very high level of just like, oh, that was entertaining. Wow. You get into the emotion. And that's what our consciousness is. You know, that's what our life has become. And that's like, I remember, Cam, I remember when you would tell me, we would talk on the phone and you'd be like, consciousness is a con. I would get so like emotional inside, not like emotional, but like triggered, just like, oh God, oh no, I don't want to hear this. Like, what are you saying? What does that even mean? Consciousness is a con. Like it just felt like, I don't know. Like I felt in that moment, like you were a bad guy telling me just because you were saying consciousness is a con. Right. But now my understanding of it more clearly is just like, if you were to watch a movie and believe that movie to be fact and like try to live that movie and all you knew was just the scenes of the movie and like that's just all you interacted with, that would be a con, because you would be believing that as opposed to understanding all the mechanics behind it and like what's actually real, you wouldn't even be interacting with reality, you know, as a simple way of putting it.
Yeah. I was
How
just,
would you
I was
how would
just,
you describe conscious?
it's the programming that you have as to how you respond to everything and how you interpret everything. So it's a program. And the reason why, I don't know what the context was, but probably it was some context when we were talking about that, of like why consciousness and raising your vibration, all that stuff isn't the answer to anything. And if you think about it, everybody in the law of attraction, all that side of things, is always looking at it from the perspective of what makes them feel better, what makes their life better. And it's like a selfish starting point, which isn't to say that feeling better and having a better life is a bad thing.
The tricky part is it sounds so selfless to be like, I want to support everybody to get their own dreams and their
But
own
that's
goals.
why they say it, because
Yeah,
it
it sounds
alleviates the
so
subconscious
honorable.
whatever guilt and gives them permission. And yeah.
Here's the other thing about that, like consciousness in my mind was conflated with awareness, you know? And so saying like,
and that's the point. Yeah.
saying
Consciousness doesn't mean you're aware of things. Consciousness is the programmed responses that you have that you don't actually distinguish from your awareness, because you're not
Yeah.
aware that they can be distinguished, because you don't have words to describe and understand them. And so like even like your thoughts, you think that they're coming from you, but they're not.
So
Like,
when you were telling me consciousness is a con, when you were saying those words, in my mind, I was thinking you were telling me don't think, or don't have awareness, or don't be like, I thought of it as not being
It's like
self-directed,
ba-
even though
based off
that's the
that,
complete opposite of what you were saying.
even though when you're actually participating in all the consciousness points, you're not directing yourself. Which is the
Exactly.
whole point.
it's
right?
like awareness is like when your body takes in the information, or like
Or just like look around right now, like you're
you're
aware.
here, right?
Yeah.
And then consciousness is like the output of all of your internal processes and programming, where it runs through all of your filters and then it outputs your thoughts or whatever.
Yeah, or even just the way you're interpreting stuff. It's the way it's like everything that fills up your awareness right now. You know, and I was just thinking about like how there's this statement, and I don't know if it's in something that's publicly available or not, but Bernard had said this point about when you direct a child's vocabulary effectively from the beginning, instead of their mind developing a character, it'll be their body that develops a character.
Mm.
And so if you look at what does that mean for the body to develop the character versus the mind, it's like the mind, okay, look at it like this. Like, actually, I really highly recommend everybody to read like those iRobot books. And when I say iRobot, it's like a whole series of novels and stuff, because there's a character in it named Daniil, and he's a humanoid robot. And it's like not even a normal thing in their society to have these, but he's like, you wouldn't, like the average person wouldn't be able to distinguish him from a human being, except as you kind of think like he's extremely logical, right? But it's interesting because like there'll be scenes in the book where the character will sort of be going through some kind of emotion, like the human character, but the robot doesn't respond to that at all. Like, it's not like he's ignoring the person. It's just kind of like the robot doesn't take offense. The robot doesn't say spiteful shit. Like, he'll explain himself. And it's very much like the approach we take with our kids, or like you'll see with Max when you interact with him. Like, except Max is a human, so he wants to, there's a different, he's not operating from like these laws that the robots are programmed with. He's a human being, so he still kind of like wants to understand and empathize, you know what I mean? And so like yesterday we had some lunch in town, and then the kids wanted to go to the playground, so we went to the playground, and there was a family there with some kids, and the kids went and started playing with these other kids that were there. And there was one kid about Max's age. There was some kids Seneca's age, but Seneca actually just wanted to play with the baby. There was like a 1-year-old, and she was just playing with him the whole time. And Max, he went up to this girl and he like tapped her on the back. Like, hey, like, do you want to play a game, right? And I didn't really see the whole interaction, but she said something about him being rude, right? And then he went to the mom, like Max went to the mom and was saying like, your daughter was saying that I was being rude, but that's not correct. And he was like, and the mom was like trying to sort of argue with him, and Max was just like would not let it go. Like the whole time and then he was like changing the subject, and he was spending like 30 minutes just talking to the mom and the dad. And then like they were like, he was asking like, how old is she? Right? He was asking how old is the girl? And the parents were like, she's 13. Like they were kind of being spiteful, like just lying, even though it was kind of a joke, I guess. But like he was like, okay, because he doesn't necessarily know like a 13-year-old should look a certain way. And so, you know what I mean? He doesn't understand, like, you're telling him he's 13, okay. And then later, the way he was interacting with her, he goes up to the parents, he goes, your daughter is like kind of dumb. And the mom was like, oh, like you saw she was like really offended, right? And she was like, well, I don't know about why would you say that? And he was like, I mean, well, what grade is she in? And they were like, well, she's in kindergarten. And he was like, but she's 13. And he was like, yeah, she's dumb. And they were getting offended. Like he was trying to insult her, but he wasn't trying to insult her. He was
You gave me
like,
this piece of information.
explain to them,
This
like, your
piece of information.
13-year-old is not smart. Like, you need to do something about this. That's what he's trying to explain to them.
But
but
wait,
they
what
were-
was the
they had
point?
lied to
Like
him in the
he,
first
he was,
place.
yeah, he was saying like she's 13 and she's in kindergarten. She must be dumb.
But also she's 13. She can't, like, I'm not even 6 and I'm way smarter than her.
Hmm.
And she's 13, like, because he's trying to tell them technically. That's like starting point always, right? He's like
Yeah.
trying to help them, right? And it was just interesting because like their interaction, and then outside of that, they were just like yelling at their kids the whole time. Like when the toddler started walking away, they were like, where are you going? Where do you think you're going, mister? You know, like, where do you think you're going? And he turned around,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, you better get that grin off your face. You know, like, you're talking to a 1-year-old child. Like, you're just allowing him to walk towards the street, and then you're yelling at him like he has the same fucking level of understanding that you have.
Yeah.
And when I was just looking at, because Katie and I were just discussing it later, and I was like the daughter was saying that Max was being rude for tapping her, because I guarantee you the parents had said that to her when she tapped some other kid, or you know what I mean? Like there's this fear of like, oh my, someone's going to be offended by, and like we weren't interfering. Like we won't protect other people from our kids. Like obviously if they were going to do something physically violent, we would, but that doesn't happen. Like our kids are not physically aggressive.
Yeah.
But like if they're going up into parents and like challenging them and stuff, like I just allow it. You know, and I only will step in if I can see that the parent might cause a problem. You see what I mean? Like if they're gonna like overreact or something, but generally that's not the case, right? So I will let Max like have these like arguments with like adults where he's like talking, because he doesn't have this distinction of like, I'm a child, you're an adult, I can't talk. Like he sees them as equal to him. You see what I mean? And like if they say something that doesn't make sense, he will challenge them. Like he will just like, we'll be in a store and he'll randomly ask people like, do you believe in God? And then they'll be like, yeah. And he'll be like, it doesn't make sense though. Why would you believe in God? There isn't a God. Like he'll just like argue with them about stuff, like at the checkout at like Hobby Lobby, you know, like, and it's fascinating. And like, but the reason I brought it up is because I was just looking at that whole point of how the way those parents were interacting with the kids, and the way the kid, and what's interesting because the mom was trying to justify why the daughter was saying he was rude or whatever, even though the mom probably wasn't even aware what happened. And then like 5 minutes later, the little girl and Max are like chasing each other, and she's the rat and he's a cat and he's trying to chase her, and like they're having fun. But it was just like, but why did the girl have that pattern of saying that? And it's like, I'm not blaming her. It's just so unnecessary. And that's what I mean by consciousness. Like it's shit that gets in the way of just being physically here. And what I noticed about Max is his vocabulary is much more grounded and real. And so the way he interacts with people is like, who's in front of him, like in the moment, like discussing something. It's not bringing in a lot of other stuff, if that makes sense. And it's like there's not a, like you'll notice with most children who have grown up with a lot of TV, and parents who are just not questioning at all, like not doing this process, not actually considering how should I treat my children. Like, how would I want to be treated if I were them to be really supported effectively? You'll see with the average child, like they're very spiteful, and they're either spiteful and or they're just repeating stuff that they heard on TV. Like what they're wanting to play is just acting out something they've seen on TV or like that. And I was the other night where I was playing with the kids in the bed before bedtime, and like they were asking me to tell them like stories about things from when I was a kid, like that I knew about. So I was telling them about like, because they had seen like things about superheroes, like kind of out and about, like you'll see something like a Spider-Man or something. And I was telling them like what those characters were and like what's the context of the stories and everything. So I was describing to them what each character was, like what was the story of it and like the context and like why people were obsessed with it and all this kind of stuff, just giving all that context. And then like they wanted to pretend that they were like these different superheroes and like we were playing a game together, but they've never watched it. They've never, so they don't know how to play from the perspective of they're just copying what they've seen. So like, so Max was this character Poison Ivy, and I don't know if this is correct, but I had told him that like when she kisses people, like it like makes them like sick, like as if they have poison in them or whatever. And so he was like drinking water, bottles of water, and being like, I'm filling myself up with this, but actually I'd reversed it. And so when I kiss people, it actually heals them. And so he's like making up his own version of it. And like Seneca wanted to be Spider-Man for some reason. And I explained to them how like you like he can shoot these webs. And we're talking about, it doesn't even make sense. Like, where did that come from? Right.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, well, she was like, I'm Spider-Man, but she was like, whenever someone gets hurt, then they need to go go get help like at the hospital. What I do is I shoot cars out of my hands, and then they get in the car, and then we drive to the hospital. And they're just like making up their own stuff about it, like totally
That's so cute.
like nothing to do with the thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like they're not doing it from the start. It's like they're using their imagination, and then they're looking at practical things. Like they're not like, okay, you're the bad guy, I'm the good guy, let's fight. Do you know what I mean? It's like nothing to do with the actual context of
Seneca's
superheroes.
like,
But then
how are they going to get to the hospital if they get hurt? I'll provide transportation. That's what it is. That's amazing.
One thing
Fake
that I've
insecurity.
noticed, one thing that I've noticed with like a lot of kids who watch television is they have this like, I was telling Asif about this. Remember the other day I was telling you about this? They have this like frenetic energy about them where it's just like as if their whole life is just like next action, next this, and they're constantly like, yeah, that, like, and they're really it's almost like they're so impulsed with the television that everything has to be this extreme excitement. And that's not to say that like kids don't get excited naturally, but it's the excitement that I see that like Max or Seneca or even Ben have, like and other TT kids, versus the excitement that kids who are just like watching television all the time. It's really different. It's a really different type of excitement, where it's like
it's like an excitement of being together. Like our kids, they get enjoyment just with being with other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so you can be doing things in different contexts, but it's like just being with each other and like obviously doing some activities and things too. Like here, I have this picture, I was just looking for it. Like this is like what Seneca does in the morning with me, right? Here she is like feeding the chickens. And she loves to sit out there. And then we have a little plastic, like one of those Adirondack chairs that you can kind of lean back on,
Yeah.
And we just sit out there, and then she sits on my lap. And like now what we've done is like, well, we figured out, because like with our chickens, like some people have chickens where like they've played with them every day since a chick, and like they'll like sit on their shoulder and all this kind of stuff. Like ours don't do that. They're just kind of like, they're just out there. So if you try to go pick them up, usually they'll run away, right? But we figured out like if we sit out there and we let them eat out of our hands, we've done this with a few chickens, then like after like a couple days, like they'll let you pick them up. Like it's interesting. Like I thought it would be like, oh, can't ever pick up those chickens, right? But
yeah.
So there's a few that'll come and eat out of our hands, and then we'll like do that, and we'll like put it on our pants. They'll jump up on our pants or whatever, or on our knees or whatever, and she like wants to put it on my shoulder and all this stuff, right? But like that's the it's like a physically real experience. versus, imagine like the average kid. It's a hypothetical child who's like gets to go be around some chickens, and then they're wanting to pretend to shoot missiles at them. You know what I mean? Like running around chasing, like, like because they're trying to act out some other thing that's like been programmed into them, not being like, okay, what is this? This is a chicken. Okay, what do I need to do with a chicken? You know what I mean?
And that's consciousness.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you're this extra stuff. And so if you think about it, all the stories you've been taught, whether you realize they're stories or not, when you went to school, with the exception of mathematics and grammar, like very specific mechanical type subjects, you were just taught a bunch of stories. Whether it was science class, history, even chemistry in many cases, like a lot of it is story based, like in terms of what you're being taught, because you're giving context. And I mean, think about this, like think about all the stuff you're taught in chemistry that you can't verify with your own eyes.
Yeah.
Like you're taught about like what an atom is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the amount of evolutions of like the nucleus and how the electrons revolve around the atom. It's like that evolves like with each. It's like the Rutherford, you know what I mean? All the different Bohr diagrams. It's like one is not true. It's like, okay, but then we're going to teach you this, and you get taught all of them.
And you're not even explained the context of, oh, this is an evolving theory.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, there's atoms and there's electrons that like revolve around the nucleus, and then like later in the course you're like, oh, and then there's like valence shells and they're like energy levels, and you're probably thinking like, oh, it's an electron cloud, like what? But I thought it was but you're not even thinking that. You're just like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll memorize that. You're not even like, think about when you're in school, you're not even trying to connect the dots. You're not even trying to say, okay, how does all of this connect together to give me a sense of reality? You're like, this is just some fucking shit. It's no different than if somebody gave you fucking Aladdin and was like, by the end of this movie, you need to be able to tell me the colors of the genie, how many spells did he cast, what at what time did this happen, and what was the story, and like who did this, and like, and you're like, yeah, okay, and you watch it and you don't even care about the movie. You don't even give a shit. You're not even like, what is the bigger picture of what this movie is trying to tell me or anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're just trying to like
Pass the class.
I mean, pass the class, but it's like a lot of kids are just like, I don't want to displease my parents. You don't even care about passing the class. Actually. That's
true.
But passing the class is a
That's
means
so
to an
true.
end. It's just to keep somebody off my back.
Yeah.
And like all of that, like, so all the stories we're taught, like we're taught about evolution. And that doesn't mean when I say like you're taught about evolution and it's all bullshit, that doesn't mean there isn't some type of evolutionary process in our reality. It's just that the context, the framing around these things is such that you don't really, you look at them in a certain way. Because if you think about it, what is the average person who learns about, and this is why you have Christians like upset about being taught evolution in schools, which is also retarded, because they're just saying that they want to have their own version of what they think reality is, which is also story. It's not real.
Right.
But, but even with the way it's taught, what you come out, how can I explain it? What is the driving force behind evolution that everyone subconsciously accepts because of the way it's explained to you?
That like we're always getting better.
Like adapting.
At what?
Like
survival.
That's it.
Oh, that's true.
So it's like the underlying point that you don't even, it's like when you're watching Cinderella, you don't realize you're being programmed as a girl to look for a Prince Charming to save you from your shitty situation. Like, even though that's obviously explicitly the point of the story, you don't think about that. You just watching the story, but you don't realize it's actually programming you. And that moment when he sweeps her off her feet, and there's like the magical swirls and all this stuff, it's like that actually is being imprinted as something for you to look for, And so with the evolution, it's like we're getting better at surviving. So you'll never question that starting point. And so even all the stuff with the World Economic Forum, it's like, what's the starting point of everything that's being said? It's like to help everybody survive better. And then they're not really looking at the context of real life. So they can manipulate everybody into doing something that only actually benefits a few, because the argument is that underlying it, that it's going to increase our chances for survival. even though it's not even explicitly said, you've already got that program running.
And because it's always like survival of the fittest, so it's like that's what's going to evolve. So if we just help a few, then that will evolve to like everyone's at that standard of this few, but that never actually happens, you know?
Yeah, and also it's like natural selection.
Yeah.
It's there's just all these points that subconsciously impulse a person to think you're not in any control or direction of it.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like why should I try to actually improve myself and actually improve the world as a normal average person? Because there's greater forces greater than me that are doing that and taking care of all of that. And we're probably at the pinnacle right now of human evolution, but they don't look at what the actual meaning of evolve is. Like what we're doing with parenting, right, is actually evolving parenting.
Yeah.
It's actually looking at how do you parent in the most effective way. And that's why it's like, we're not saying we've done the best job. We're saying for what we know and what we've been able to do, our starting point is that. And then so other people who have, like when I look at my kids, they'll do better because they're already being supported from a young age when I wasn't supporting myself until much later.
Yeah.
So actual evolution is when you're looking at the context of what is actually best and directing things from that perspective. Because there's so many things, like we're talking about the electric cars and all that. It's all survival. It's like, oh, well, if you don't drive the electric cars, we're all going to die because of climate change. And it's like, maybe there's some pretty cool parts about electric cars and electric stuff and all that stuff. I mean, I have power tools that are electric. They don't run on gas. They have batteries that you recharge. I mean, that's like a standard thing in construction, right? You also have ones you plug into the wall. They're all electric. So there's cool things about electricity and, not gas powered stuff, but no one's looking at it from the starting point of like, actually, what would be best? And even if Elon Musk wanted to, he couldn't, because he's in a world where everything, the context everyone is aware of is survival.
Yeah.
So without a person changing individually their starting point and going back through and looking at what are all the stories that I believe and what is the context of that and what am I participating in that, like I think it was you or either you or Asif earlier said this point. I think it was you, Drake, that said that point about what was that? You said this really great point about like it's like the personal point of looking at your personality, and people don't realize how much that forms the world around us.
Oh yeah.
Like they think it's a top down.
Yeah.
Which the mistake is, if I change, everything will magically change, which is not true.
Right.
But if everyone says, if I change, then everything changes. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean it's futile for you to change, because the way I look at it is, as my change right now is in the context of supporting other people to get to that realization within themselves. So my change is not worthless if no one else is doing it. It's just, I'm aware, so I'm fucking responsible to change and to support other people. And then over time, you get a cumulative effect. So it's not futile if no one else is doing it right now.
Yeah. There was a Facebook post that I saw that was like, but I'm only one person, said 7 billion people.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, to that extent, like if you change, if I change, if we all change, we can change the world. Obviously, that's so obvious, but everyone is participating in not changing and holding on to who they are.
And you know what I was just realizing, like when you said that, think about someone who's really good at like giving a speech or something, right? Who can like make a lot of people understand something. Okay.
Yeah.
Like a Martin Luther King or somebody like that, right?
Yeah.
How hard would it really be? Okay, let me put it this way. Would it be impossible for the average person to practice and be able to speak basically, I mean, not like in his same style, but I mean, be able to speak effectively in front of a group of people? And if they were saying something that made sense and they understood how to speak and how to get the right, a good, effective mass communication like that, couldn't the average person develop that?
Definitely.
So imagine the average person who looks at that and they're like, oh, I could just never be like him. And it's like, think about, break Martin Luther King days down, Martin Luther King Jr.'s day down.
Yeah.
Okay. He gets up in the morning, he eats breakfast, he works on his speech, he talks to somebody on the phone, he goes and visits somebody, has a meeting. And then at a certain point, they start getting together and they think about, hey, let's put this group together. Let's put this speech together. And a bunch of people, it's like a company, and they're all organizing activity. And then he's practicing his speech and he's like sharing it with other people and they're giving him feedback. And then he eventually goes and does it. It's not like he just like woke up and was like floated and there was like millions of people there and he just like gave a speech and it was just so amazing. It came like he was just, you know what I mean? Like, and he started with speaking in a church or whatever.
Yeah.
So the idea that the
Yeah.
average person looks at somebody who they think makes a difference and says, I could never be that person. It's like, okay, maybe you couldn't. It's not
There's a
true.
caveat to that, because the caveat is, and this is the same point that people have towards anyone who's successful. The caveat is that they had a broad vocabulary, like that. That's the caveat.
You're absolutely right. But that's the whole point of our group, isn't it?
It is.
So like you're in our group, we're all developing the vocabulary of what does it take to actually change the world. And like you can read the blogs, you can listen to Equab, you listen to all the videos that are available that gives you all that context. It's just studying it. Now, if you're like, I don't understand, how can I make a difference and speak like Martin Luther King and have that kind of vocabulary while also just watching Game of Thrones every night and just, you know, like playing video games all day and smoking weed? I'm like, well, then that's not going to happen. But that's the first part of your
Right.
process, isn't it? How do I disengage myself from shit that doesn't matter and start engaging in stuff that does? And that's why it is a process, because you can't go from 0 to 60. Like you have like immediately, it takes time to get there. So you have to start with what's the first, like, what am I doing right now? If I were to evaluate everything I'm participating in, what am I participating in that's actually not best for me and everybody else? You know, and that can be overwhelming, but you can just look at right now. What's your immediate points? Start with that.
Yeah.
Again, the way this kind of concept is abused is when people go, if I just focus on what's in front of me right at this moment, everything in the world changes. And they think that it's like a magical, from that step, everything else changes. And it's like, no, it gets you to the next point, because eventually what's in front of you is the opportunity to speak to 10,000 people in an arena
Yeah.
who you're influencing to also go and do something, you know, whatever. You see what I mean? So
Oh, yeah. Could you also talk about like, because I see sometimes people will fall into this, like understanding that it is a process, it does take steps. Then they focus on, well, how I'm going to get there. And then they focus on, well, it has to be like this specific way. I have to develop this first and then that, and then this. And so then they focus on just trying to develop this, as opposed to keeping their eye on like the entire, like, okay, here's
Well,
the
yeah.
goal of where I'm going.
let's just give a quick overview. Like the whole point, you broke it down just a minute ago, was the average person can't have an influence because they lack the vocabulary.
Yeah.
They lack the effective ability to communicate. So
Yeah, like talk about vocabulary, because think about all the new people who are coming in who are like vocabulary, like I already know words, or I gotta learn words that I don't know. Like I really doubt that if I just learn words that I don't know, that, you know, like how
Vocabulary.
people's typical definition of vocabulary.
yeah, it's like, but you don't know how to change the system. You don't understand, like when we were making the distinction between consciousness and awareness, that's a distinction in terms that you don't have. Like your vocabulary, which is just all the words that you know, which becomes all the concepts, which becomes all the ideas, because those are all formed from the words. And it's like,
It's really just like programming. Like it's like you don't have that programming language in your software or hardware or whatever you want to say, but like you don't have the programming language to complete that action, right? And
Some
so
people feel that they do, right? They're like, yeah, I know what a relationship is. I know what patience is. I know what.
but
You know what I
it
mean?
would be like you're sitting down, you're programming your computer, or you're reading the code in your computer, and it says, you know, if this action if this input gets put in, then you do this action. But you have the wrong word in for whatever action you're supposed to be taking, or you have the wrong word for whatever input is supposed to be being read. And so every time that input actually comes in, you're reading a different input. Or every time you go to take that action, you do a different action than the successful action that you mean to take. Like, so what you're saying as far as like relationship. So the input would be when my spouse has a disagreement with me, then the action is to I don't know, yell at them. because you're reading that input as an argument, you're reading that input as a fight, you're reading that input as
that
like,
right there, that's the vocabulary issue, is
Yeah.
like disagreement equals argument, disagreement equals opposition, opposition equals problem,
Like-
equals conflict, equals
Yeah.
suppress, equals.
Like that example I gave with the kids at the playground. Like,
Right.
you guys know Max. Can you imagine tapping him on the back and him going like, "Ah, why are you being so rude?"
yeah, right.
Like, you wouldn't, because his interaction would be like, "Oh, hi, like, what's up? Like,
Yeah.
what are you tapping me for? Like, what do you
And if
want
he wanted you to stop, he would just say, "Can you stop doing that?"
Yeah, you just be like,
Like,
"Stop."
Yeah,
we are not
exactly.
constantly telling the kids you're being rude.
Right.
We explain to them what rudeness actually means.
What does rudeness mean?
Rude just means you're breaking social convention.
You're right. Okay, that's that's what I had in my mind.
You know what I mean? Like, if I was sitting with you and I was like, "Dude, those pants you're wearing, like, yeah, you gotta take those off, man." Like, if it was me and you asked, if you'd be like, "Really? What do you not like about?" You know what I mean? But if I was like just walked up to somebody on the street and I was like, "Those pants, not cool. Those are not good looking pants," they'd be
"That
like,
guy was rude."
"Oh," you know, like. But if that was their friend and it was a certain context, maybe they wouldn't react. So it's
Yeah.
like the way you'd. So if you're saying like, okay, here's a perfect example. You're at a restaurant, you walk in, and they say, you have to wear a mask. And you're like, "I'm not wearing a mask." Right? Are you being rude?
Yes.
To them, you are. Yeah.
It just depends, like, how you look at it.
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, I think it's fucking rude. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't actually, but you know what I mean? Like, if you look at the rules of being rude, it's rude to be like, I have to wear a mask. But it's like now,
It's rude to ask
rudeness
someone.
Walk
means
6
this.
feet.
So rudeness is a lot like morality. And why is the word rude important? Because parents will use that word to manipulate their kid. They don't explain what it means. Like, just think of so many examples, like where like a parent, like a kid is like, doing something the parent doesn't want them to do, even if the starting point of the child is not spiteful, it's not bad, it's more like it's being done without understanding or awareness, and the parent will be like, "Stop being so rude." You know, like okay, like the kid, let's say they have a rock in their shoe and they try and take off their shoes at the playground. The parents like, no, don't take off those shoes. And like, "I want my shoes off. I want my shoes off." But they're not able to explain why. And the parents like, "Don't be rude to your mom. Do not be rude to your mother. She's telling you to put your shoes on." Like, they would take that attitude, and like now you're just hearing this word rude. So it just means you're not complying with my wishes.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're rude. You see what I mean? And that's not what the word rude means,
Right.
actually.
And it's based
in
off
a
this
certain-
construct of you always have to listen to your parents and all that stuff.
I mean, so just that one example, you can see how the interaction socially in a group can be controlled by the word rude with different definitions and so forth. And you can have a lot more intimate relationship with somebody if word is not a barrier. Like if I was telling Katie like, "Hey, I didn't like that dinner you made last night. Like, there was too much whatever flavor, whatever." She wouldn't be like, "Wow, I can't believe how rude you're being right now." You know,
You
she
know
would
how
be
much-
like, "Oh,
yeah.
really?" She'd be like, what did you not like about it?"
Yeah.
You know, and she might be like, "I don't know how to change that because I just did what I did always." You know, like, I don't, and it might just be something within me, like, whatever, we could have a disagreement about it. Doesn't mean what I say goes. But she's not going to be like, "Ugh, I'm so offended that you didn't like my cooking." You know what I mean? Like, because that idea of like, you have to like it, it's a construct, and you were taught that by your parents. So that's a very simple, like
You should
personal.
like it because I put in work and I made it, not because
Right.
like,
And
you're
there's
supposed to
many
say it
times
tastes good.
where the kids will be like, like the dinner will be put in front of, not many times, but there'll be a time where the dinner is put in front of them. And Max immediately is like, I don't like this.
Hmm.
He didn't even try it.
Hmm.
And it's like, hold on, what do you mean you don't like it? Like, this is terrible. Right. And so it's like, hold on, consider this for a moment. Like, and he'll be like, Katie, go make me something different. And I'm like, I want you to consider this for a moment. Okay. Katie spent a lot of time preparing this for us to eat. Like, you didn't have to put any focus or effort into having this meal. And she did that while taking care of the Caius and making sure you guys have what you need during the day and so forth. So it's not to say you have to eat it because of that, but to immediately disregard it and then ask her to do something else to take more of her time is totally not considering her at all. You see, and you haven't even given yourself the opportunity to try it and actually see if it's something that you'll enjoy. Okay. So in this context, if you are not, I'm not going to force you to eat the food, but you can go make yourself some other food if you want. Do you see the difference? Instead of like, just, you're going to go to your room, mister. Like you don't
Or
talk to your mother like that.
you're not moving from that spot until you finish all that food.
Yeah.
I
Right.
have so
Or
many
like,
friends who like are traumatized because they would sit at the table for like 4 hours and they're like, I'm not eating it. And their parents are like, you're not fucking moving until you eat that food.
but it's like, that's
Oh.
a major portion of your life.
Mm.
So imagine if instead of being filled up with all these examples where, oh, I found this funny statement. People say like, I'm too blessed to be stressed. If you heard people say something like that, right?
Sure.
But I was thinking like, I'm too suppressed not to be stressed. Do you know what I mean? Like, meaning it's like everything is to suppress the child. It's like you have to just sit there and take it.
Yeah.
And like, just same thing happens in school, right? So you develop these personality characteristics that just like become totally unmanageable. Like when you take every single individual in on our planet and you add up all these dysfunctional personalities, what you get, the sum total of that is like a totally fucked up, dysfunctional world where we can be in an age, in a time period where we all know war is fucking stupid. We all know war is fucking stupid. We all know poverty is fucking stupid. We all know abuse and like all these things is stupid. Racism, murder, like rape. Like we all know it's fucking dumb. Like, and yet it still happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and war happens and we all know this, the TV's lying to us. And yet it's still happening. It's still happening. Like, why isn't anyone doing about it? And you know what? We're so fucking stupid still as a race of people, as human beings, that we think protesting still makes a difference, even though we know it doesn't.
Yeah.
Protesting, it's just so dumb. It's like it's literally, you're the kid at the dinner table saying like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to eat then. You're just protesting. And they're like, I actually don't care.
Yeah.
That's fine. As long as you comply and you don't do anything outside of what I want you to do, that's fine. Starve. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like that's how we're being treated by the system that we're fucking participating in. And so it may seem to people, it seems so trivial, like the word rude or something like that. But then you start thinking about what's the understanding you have to be able to run a system. And I know there's not a person who runs the system, but there's people who make decisions that affect systems. You know what I mean? Like, don't you think the CDC director has some kind of influence?
Yeah.
And you might say, oh, she's just a puppet. Okay, well, a puppet of somebody who has some fucking influence.
Sure.
Somebody is making some decisions and communicating messages that is affecting systems. And now, man, like every time I turn on any YouTube video of the kind of stuff I watch, they're always like, everything's just falling apart. It's all just falling apart. And it actually is. It actually is. Like, I had to change the blades on this mower that I have that drags on the back of my tractor.
Because it was
It's called
falling
like
apart.
It's called like a bush hog. What do you mean it's falling apart?
You said everything was falling apart, and then you went.
Oh
into
no,
the
no.
story.
Well, I'm getting to that part. It's like I had to change the blades because they're fucking old and dull. And when I bought it used, the guy told me they need to be changed, but he didn't want to change them for me because he might strip the bolts. And if the bolts were stripped, he was like, the bolts are on back order. And I don't know if when you'll be able to get some more. So I'll just give it to you. You can still use it. It's just not going to be as effective as if you change the blades. You couldn't sharpen them anymore. They were so done. So it got to the point where I'm like, it's not even doing any cutting anymore. I have to change them. So I got the bolts, not a big deal. And then I needed to get a wrench, like a pneumatic wrench. You know those ones that you have at this that turn off, take the bolts off of cars.
Yeah.
You know those things, right?
Yeah.
I had to get one of those. And
Because you're getting a NASCAR.
yes, I'll be taking some pit stops.
Yes.
And so I went to the auto place in town, and I was like, I need this adapter that would go from the size of the thing on my wrench to the size of the socket, because like my wrench didn't fit into the socket. The socket was too big. Okay, it was like the wrong sizing. And so I was like, yeah. And I asked the guy, and they had one, but it was the reverse. It was like small to big rather than big this or small to big this way. And I was like, no, I need the other way. And so and then the lady goes, oh, let me ask so-and-so. And she's like, hey, who's looking for this part? And he goes, oh yeah, we haven't been able to get that one for 6 months. Like a very standard, like adapter for a wrench, you know? And we've talked about other examples. There's so many examples where things are being delayed. They don't have the supplies, the supply chain, the this and the that. And unfortunately, a lot of people want to believe it's all because of the elite doing it.
It's
Like
all 'cause of
they're-
Ukraine, right?
Like it's like they're deliberately fucking with things to control everybody, which I'm sure there is some of that. But a lot of it is, let me put it this way. Can the elite see problems coming up in the supply chain before the average person?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because they're the ones who have all those connections and networks, and they can see like, oh, okay, I need to do this. I can't do this.
Or they're
And so-
creating the problem too.
They're also seeing like society and watching the pattern and trend and what's happening in the economy, and they're like, oh fuck, this is gonna happen, and people are going to XYZ. And
That's also part of the reason why they are the elite, because they can see the trends kind of before they happen.
And it's not like they have a special ability. They're just paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And they're in a position where that information comes to them because they're asking for it and they have the ability to get the information. You know what I mean? Like they can talk to so-and-so at Exxon and be like, hey, what's y'all's production like? Another example. Okay. It's the Illuminati, right? Okay. We bought a cow here at our place, right? Because we want to have our own milk. Got it home, right? And our neighbor who has TechnoTutor, he helped me go get the cow because I didn't know anything about cows. So he had a trailer, took his trailer, we went and got the cow, right?
That's awesome.
Brought it back. And then Katie was like, oh, you should ask him about like, hey. Then I said to him, hey. That's how I start every conversation about hey, you have to say hey. I was like, hey,
Wait, did you run out of was
no,
that
no, it's fine.
you hit
It's
the
fine.
button?
supply
Yeah.
chain.
Supply chain cut off for the recording.
Anyways, long story short, I asked him like, do you know where I can get hay for the cow? Because I just don't know. Like you can't just go to a store and buy it typically, as far as I know. And he was like, I could probably get some for you because his family does all that stuff. And then he got back to me and he was like, we can't sell you any right now because we didn't even have enough for our cows. He was like, but call so-and-so and they can probably do it. So I called so-and-so and he said the same thing. Right. And then I asked a different person who has helped me with like our air conditioning units because he has cows. And I said, do you know where I can get hay? And he said, call this guy. So I called that guy. He's like, yeah, I could get you some. He's like, what do you think? I was like, well, maybe like, he was like, do you want like one or what? And I was like, how long will that last? He said, one cow. He's like, probably about a month. And I was like, well, why don't I get like 2 or 3? And he goes, well, I mean, I could probably give you one. And I'm like, okay. Like, it was weird that he even asked me how many I want, but he was like, I probably could spare one for you right now. And then later it turns out he's like really cool. He's like, hey, when you need another one, talk to me. I'll, whatever. He was actually really cool, very helpful. It was good to create that relationship. But why is there like this problem with the hay? Because of fucking, there's a drought here in Texas. Right? And so there are things that happen that are problematic, but then things are not coordinated in a way where these things are taken care of in
And
advance.
just for people who kind of lost the train, there was Cameron's pointing out the point of like, it's not just the elite. Like there are physical phenomenons that affect us,
Right.
and it's a this particular point
So,
has
and also the reason why
I think maybe you lost the train because all of Cameron's neighbors are elite. All these cow owners.
I meant the listeners.
Also,
Good point. It's a really good point.
But another point of why I brought it up was, don't you think my neighbors already knew that there's shortages?
Yeah.
So, like, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But now I know, because now I have a cow. So now I'm in that club of people who have cows, I guess. And like, I know that, and I'm building relationships, and now I'm focusing on that. So now I'm aware of information about, because somebody else might be like, there's an artificial, hay shortage. And I would be like, no, there isn't. Like, there's a drought here in Texas and the grass is not growing. And I know, because like at this time last year, my grass was green. Right now it's like fucking, there's barely any grass.
Oh.
Right? It looks like in my yard, it looks like November, and now people are going to say like, oh, it's the Illuminati controlling the weather and all this stuff. And it's like, well, maybe it is.
It's climate change, Cameron.
Yeah, the climate's changing. Right. In any case, my point is, regardless of all that, the elite, the people, when I say the elite, I mean the people who are like at a higher level of decision making, who are not just going to their job every day and like going home and entertaining themselves. Those people are more of a problem than the elite. Because if everybody had the vocabulary and was paying attention, we could all see these things and we wouldn't let things get to the point where they're at. But right now, things are actually collapsing. And then you see what's happening in the Netherlands, right? Where they're now, and see, that's a point. Of course, I don't know all the details, but that's a point where it looks like the government is taking advantage of a situation and fucking around on purpose.
Yeah.
But maybe they know there's some fertilizer shortage that's coming up or something. I don't know. I don't know maybe they're using it to their advantage. I don't know. But that's a case where it looks like they're deliberately trying to fuck with people so that the farmers will quit growing shit and give up their land, and then they can use that land for however they want. So it's like a way of transferring property ownership or something. Yeah. So that is happening too. I'm not saying it's only random things that happen. There's a combination. But at the end of the day, the average person, it's like, why isn't the average person elite?
Because they're not willing to take responsibility for all the same things.
But I'm meaning like rhetorically, in the sense of, why can't they be? Why can't everybody be at that level of knowledge about, like, don't you think Bill Gates knows a lot about a lot of details and things that are happening in our world?
For sure.
And and you might say, oh, but he's so much smarter, but that just means he has a higher vocabulary. That's it.
Right.
And our whole point over the last 6 years basically has been to show people that us ordinary average people can take these tools, develop themselves, and then raise children that are really fucking smart, like Bill Gates level smarter. Actually, I don't think Bill Gates was, when he was Max's age, I don't know what he was like, but I really doubt he was anywhere close to our Max's. Yeah. And when you listen to Seneca, it's like, when she talks to people, she's got a higher vocabulary than 7-year-olds. And she's just like a cute little girl, like running around, like but she's way more advanced. And it's not because they're born that way, because I wasn't born that way. My mom didn't even finish high school. You can't be like, oh, well, you're just born from this family of people who, no, it's like, you can actually change yourself. And that's what real evolution is. Because right now, the evolution is not working anymore. Because even if you buy into the idea of evolution, isn't evolution a physical process? But right now, everything is the mind. You see what I mean? It's personalities, it's beliefs, it's left versus right. It's not physical reality. Like, how can you have left versus right in your body? You know what I mean? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You have to have total coordination. Otherwise, you're fucked. Like you're a hunchback or you're like limping or something. You know what I mean? And that's what's happening right now. People are allowing themselves to be divided because they have stupid fucking beliefs. Like, hey, the whole transgender thing is stupid. But unfortunately, the only other people in the world that seem to get that are people who believe in Jesus. And I'm like, he didn't have a father, a physical human. And you want to sit here and argue about trans women or not women because they're not biologically male. I'm like, what was Jesus? Where did he get his fucking Y chromosome?
Yeah.
Does God have a Y chromosome? Like he was the first single parent. Oh, he had a stepfather. Like, okay. Like then Joseph was a fucking beta male.
Yeah.
Raising somebody else's kids. Like it just doesn't make any fucking sense. So and my whole point is just to point out, like you have beliefs that are retarded.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, is the story and the details of the story really that important to you? Or is it the principles? Because a lot of people care more about the story than they do the principles. They're like, no, it's like if you live out here where I live, you wear Carhartt because that's what's at the stores. So you have a cross. Do you know what I mean? And if you live in some other place, it's a different brand or a different style or whatever. And that's all like religion is. It's just like a style. It's just like a part of your culture. It's like clothing that you wear. Yeah. But no one actually gives a shit about the actual principles behind it. And again, that's consciousness. It's like you're being distracted by a bunch of shit that you're doing to have a certain experience, but not actually looking at what's the long-term consequences of that. And so every person right now who is looking at things going on in the world, like Joe Biden and all this other stuff that they're pissed off about, and transgender and Republicans and abortion and all this stuff, every moment you spend not doing this process, not using these tools, you are literally creating all the shit that you're yelling at.
Yeah. It's interesting, like the way that you said it that way, as far as you're just wearing a brand. You don't care about the principles behind it. Like even the way that we do like stocks, for instance, like it was supposed to be anyway, the way that the story is that you're investing in a company because you believe that it's going to do well, right? And you believe in that product, or you want to invest in that product, but nobody does that anymore. You know, it's solely just based on, can I make some money off of this? What's my experience going to be with this? And that's like, just like a micro scale of what.
And they know that, so they do everything short term for those people so they can make money, because otherwise they'll get pissed off.
Right.
And then we complain about corporations only care about profits.
All these companies. Yeah.
It's like all your fucking 401k is you've been giving money to these people the whole time and expecting that they're going to give you money back.
Exactly.
And you're pissed that the corporations are greedy.
Yeah.
Like all the fucking hippies who were anti everything grew up and fucking went to work corporate jobs to get pensions, and now they're mad at the corporation still.
It's hilarious.
And the war machine and all that. Also, it's like, why do people wear Nike shoes? Like, where do you wear Jordans or whatever?
Yeah.
Because you think vicariously, it's like it makes you like that.
Yeah.
It's like the same reason people wear the crosses. It's like, if I wear the cross, it makes me like Jesus. It's like, no, you know what makes you like Jesus? Being on a cross. Not fucking dangling it around.
Jesus didn't wear a necklace.
Aaliyah brought this,
but cross.
Aaliyah brought this point up. I believe in God, so I'm automatically a good person. And I was thinking, like, that's also what makes Max more advanced than where Bill Gates was at, or even just these kids who are being supported with Technotutor from the earliest age. It's that they're growing up with these principles, right? Which automatically puts you at an advantage, because it's like, you're not just automatically like, oh, because of this, I'm a good, like Max would never say like, I'm just a good person. No, it's like, it's just not even in his vocabulary. But
he won't even say I'm just smart. He'll say it's because I use Technotutor. Why don't you use it? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's like, that's really what the advantage is like growing up with principles. And that's what everyone's like really missing. And where this like pinnacle point of like where society is right now, it's like because even from my own experience, it's like you have this like existential crisis where you realize everything's a fucking lie and I was never supported, and everything that I was taught is not actually practical and never actually like it doesn't support me to live in reality. Like, I don't know about money, I don't know about actually taking care of myself, I don't know how this system works, so now I'm just going to stumble my way through life and resent everything. And then then you get to the point of like, oh, that's where you start getting mad at the government and you go protest, right? Like, this is what then causes those kinds of reactions and actions of people to react in those ways. But it's like, then it's like, okay, this is why then you also then get overwhelmed, because you're like, well, who am I to then change myself, and then no one else is doing this, and how am I the only sole person that's going to change the system? Which is then where like self-perfected, techno tutor, all this stuff comes in. It's like, okay, now when you have a group, you don't feel like the only one that's gonna have to change and do all these things. You actually have the support of all these people who are also doing the same thing and also living by these principles, so then you can have at least that like direction to then change the system, right? Because otherwise it really is just like a spontaneous, like, I guess like a freak, almost like a freak accident of like, some people will become very successful and like break out of like whatever programming that they've been given and become successful in the system. But then it's really it's you're not actually doing anything. You've just kind of gamed the system, so to speak, to then become successful, but nothing's actually changed. You're still carrying on and repeating the exact same things that you were that was done to you, and then that's what you'll then teach to your kid. And hopefully maybe your kid will again break out of the same cycle that you did, but it's not actually guaranteed.
But
Right.
even those and even those people who break out and then go become successful, they're not looking at the whole picture.
Right.
They're not looking at what is best. And so they're just for a short time period benefiting, but they're just as much a victim to all the fucking supply chain shit now and all that. So, and we've been saying for a long time, like since Destiny, because this point was so clear to me from very early on. And I was saying this on my Facebook, just generally speaking, like you might think that like you're in the West, you're in the first world, and you might think that none of the stuff that happens, like poverty and all that shit, affects you, but it's going to eventually.
Yeah.
And people don't want to believe that. Like, oh no, it's just they actually believe that the class structure that we have is set in stone and it's just the way it is, which is fucked.
Right.
Yeah.
But the whole reason why it's collapsing is because people won't accept that it's not the way it is because it's the way it is. It's the way it is because we accept it is the way it is. But because of that, but because we want it to be the case that like what I have is just because I'm amazing and great and I deserve it, even though you don't. And like the self-dishonesty involved with that, that has to collapse. That has to be challenged. And if you were, think of it as if you were life, if you were the principal that was like, I want what is best no matter what. And I will not allow abuse anymore. I will not. It's like, people, you could call it God, but the problem with doing that is like, it makes it like it's this thing that will save you.
Right.
See, the thing about life is not benevolent. Do you know what I mean? Like benevolent would mean like it just, in that context, I mean like it just magically fixes everything. It's more like, I'm gonna let you get into a car accident so you can fucking, and like, you can so you can fucking wake up. But it's not like letting you do it. It's like you're creating it. So it's not like life is this thing doing something to you. It's not my point. I don't want to create that as the impression. But just imagine for a moment if you could like anthropomorphize it, okay? Like if you were this principle that was like, I will not accept, just like I'm sitting here and I'm seeing all this abuse going on. I'm not going to accept that. I have to shake things up. I have to let, like, this person is sitting here benefiting from a system while this other person is suffering, and this person can't do anything to change their situation, and this person's not doing anything to help. I'm just gonna fuck this situation, so this person's also equally fucked to that person.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go and like magically make this person better. I'm just gonna fuck the situation because it can't stand, because there is no magical make things better for that person.
Right.
It's both people working together in the context of what's best for both to actually make something that works for both of them. That's the only way it can exist. There is no magical heaven where a thing or a force or a power or an energy creates a magical place that works for everybody. That it's not possible. That's like thinking a house can just rise up out of rubble and become a beautiful house. No, it requires labor.
That's
It
like
requires work, effort.
James Lindsay. He was making this post recently about like equity and how equity, and you've said this for a long time.
You know, he was banned from Twitter, right?
I heard, yeah,
Permanently, yeah.
yeah, which is hilarious. But he was making these posts about like equity and how equity, the way that it's used, is actually evil, because what they're saying is, you know, we want everyone to have the same outcome, equal outcome, right? But we don't know how to give everybody the outcome that the best person has. So instead, we have to limit the best so that they have the same outcome as the worst, which is essentially what we've seen in communism in the past and all those sorts of things. What people detest about utopia.
See, but now let's just look at it for a moment. Like, what if our standard was everybody should have the best?
Yeah.
What if, okay, because here's the problem with James Lindsay, and I'm not saying him personally, I just mean with that starting point is like, so we just need to have equal opportunity.
Right.
Right. That's the real standard. It's like, so they're saying it's a lie. It's not equal outcome, it's equal opportunity. And then it's like, see, everyone has that. So cool.
Yeah. Which
No,
is,
they don't.
which is, it's the same problem, the same trap of virtually everything.
It's like every
It's
single
like-
person, all 8 billion people could be Elon Musk. Don't you understand?
That's not true.
like-
But
Really?
I want to make this point. Like, it's the same trap of virtually every problem where it's everyone's thinking it's this extreme or that extreme. It's this or that, as opposed to understanding like, no, it's neither. It's like what you were saying before of
Like, imagine you went to a restaurant and you both ordered the same food and one of them was like really bad. And they were like, and you were like, what the fuck? Like, why didn't you both bring us both like an amazing meal?
because it's
Ours
equal
is really good.
opportunity.
And they'd be like, well, you both have the equal opportunity to enjoy it. Be like, I want equal fucking outcome here. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's like bullshit. Like, the idea is like, oh, you're gonna force everybody into having the same thing. And since we haven't fucking done the work of how to make the system effective for everybody, the only way to do that, like you said, is to bring everybody down. But the reality is that here's the real reality. The problem is not equal outcome. The problem is that it's a deception. The problem is not equal outcome. Because if you're not for equal outcome, that's like you're saying you do not want to guarantee that everybody has water to drink.
Right.
Everyone has the same opportunity. Really? Really?
Go to India.
Like, it's
That
just
is
not true. Like,
that is the biggest ignorance of, I would say, the first world. Like, literally everyone will say, because I've actually had this conversation recently with someone, and I was like, especially in America, where there's like the most amount of people living this like life of, you know, opportunity for free, like capitalism and free market, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, that's not guaranteed for everybody else. And it's like a cloud of judgment of like, well, they just like, even for poor people here, it's like, well, they chose to be there. It's like, okay, but why are they there in the first place? You're not even questioning like what even got them into that position in the first place. Oh, well, they're just lazy or something. It's like, really? Like, there's so much more that you're just accepting versus like, no, like the system has been created like this so that you get to live this comfortable opportunistic life, and then someone over there has to basically slave to pretty much to give you the things that you have opportunity to get.
Imagine like the person like in Africa, they're like tilling their field or whatever they do, you know, and then they're like looking at their smartphone and they see this story about Americans like waiting in these food lines and like they can't get enough food, and they're like lazy Americans. Do you know what I mean? Because like you're thinking this person over here is lazy because they don't have a fucking supermarket in their country.
Yeah.
Whereas you can literally just fucking get on your phone and have food delivered to your door. How lazy is that?
Right.
Like, well, I work hard for it. It's like, no, you don't. You sit at a fucking office and you mostly spend your time doing nothing.
Yeah.
Like you were a part of a system. Let me take you out of that system and go put you right in the middle of the desert. How long will you survive?
Yeah.
So it's like total bullshit. Like the whole reason we have systems is to have equal outcomes. Like if you turned on your faucet and fucking dirt came out, you wouldn't be like, same opportunity. You'd be like, this is not the right outcome I'm looking for. Like, give me a fucking break. So it's a cop out. And it's a holier than thou. Like if you just put your faith in the Lord Jesus and you follow his commandments, all blessings will be bestowed on you. That's really the actual underlying point of equal opportunity. It's like I have been blessed by God because of my faith, and I have therefore taken advantage of the opportunities. And so from my perspective, opportunity is also an outcome. Does that make sense? Like if you don't give a child an effective ability to read, how do they have the same opportunity? Well, they could teach themselves to read and they can try really hard. And it's like, you don't understand how education works if you think, and that's part of the problem is like, they don't really understand on that side of things, on the more right side, you would say, they don't understand how education actually works.
Yeah.
They don't. And you know, they don't because they'll put their kids in fucking school. So they're retarded.
Yeah, and also the most poorest countries are the most religious. So that's also bullshit of like, oh, just because I believe in God, I'm blessed with this life. You know,
like you have to be honest about it. Like in those countries, they are the most
Most devout,
zealous,
fucking pious, like
yeah, most
praying to the
exactly,
fucking
like
temple
they
every
do
5
all the
hours.
rituals. Exactly. And their lives are fucking shit. It's terrible.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's funny. The longest, I was also bringing this up with the same person actually, of like, it's interesting how Santa Claus is this make-believe story that you get told from a really young age in order to control behavior, all this kind of stuff, to, you know, that you get what you deserve kind of thing. And then at some point you get told, this is fake, this is not real. I only did this because of XYZ or whatever, right? But then with the God story, it's like you get told this lie from the beginning, and then you keep this lie till furthermore until, you know, and then it gets passed on. I'm like, and then, for example, for someone that comes into this group and then you start challenging the point of God, it's like you're telling them that Santa Claus isn't real, but they're like, well, that just can't be. I've believed this my whole life.
Dude, that's so good, Christine. It's so true, man. It's like, yes, it's like why do people say like, okay, let's say you were like 15 years old and you still believed in Santa Claus. Would people say that's a problem?
Yeah.
And like, what if you went to work when you're like 20 or 25 or 30 and you're like, I still believe, and you like, Santa Claus is real? People would be like, oh my God, like you're kind of retarded, right? They would think that, right?
Yeah.
Because to function at that level, you got to let go of this belief. You can't be that dumb, right? So when you come into our group, like you're pointing out, into Self-Perfected and into the Techno Tutor and Destiny and all this, it's like you have to understand, like, you still believe in a lie. You're still the child who believes in Santa Claus, and we're just telling you the truth now. Just like everybody, all the adults were lying to you the whole time when you were a kid, they knew they were lying. They justified it.
Yeah.
Right.
So everybody, the problem with the God point is that as an adult, you're lying to yourself and you're justifying it to yourself. Because no matter what argument anybody makes for you, what do you not want to do? Take responsibility for this fucking world. And it's fascinating because the people who have the most energy about changing the world is the people who don't believe in God. The conservative types, the more religious types, they want to keep things as it is.
Yeah.
They you know, I saw that thing, that study they did. I was watching some video that randomly popped up about, the guy was saying, okay, it was like a TED talk. He was like, if you were to take two people to where do they have the David statue? Is it don't know.
Florence, Italy.
Florence? Okay. It's like, if you were to
Yeah.
take him there, and one person was like, you know, in awe of the statue and the majesty of it, and the other person was like uncomfortable by seeing like his dick, you know, exposed, right? They're like, which one would you guess is the Republican or the conservative, and which one would you consider as like the liberal?
The conservative is the one who's
Right?
Yeah.
And he's like, even though that's just like our judgment, he's like, the research actually shows that time and again that is the case. Like, liberals are open to new experience, and conservatives are not. Conservatives want what is comfortable and familiar. So if you think about it, even though the liberals are causing all the problems right now, because they're being manipulated by certain groups who have ability to make certain decisions, they're being manipulated into this idea that the world is going to get better if they fucking just like remove all boundaries, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like the whole deal.
Yeah.
It's not self-directed is the problem.
Right.
But so their openness to new experience and all that is like, hey, if gay dudes want to walk down the street in like dog masks and fuck each other in the ass and like spray cum everywhere on everybody, and like that's a parade, fuck it, why not? Bring your kids, you know, like
that's like them
they'll be
looking
like,
at the statue
sure.
of David and being in awe, just like, oh wow.
Right. It's no fucking different, right? Like back then they were probably like, this guy's made a statue with like a dick hanging out. Like, and they were like, whatever. So it's like our system, we have to evolve. And oh, the reason I brought it up is because it's actually just an emotional problem. That doesn't mean I'm on the side of you should just all have all these crazy new experiences. Like,
Right.
you know, like there's a context for everything. But it shows that the people on that side are more like afraid of something. They're uncomfortable. They don't want things to change. And the problem with that is you don't want a system to change where the starting point of the system was like the destruction of it was already built into it. It's like you're in a house where the foundation is fucked and you don't want to move and you don't want to fix anything. And you don't, because it's going to take a total overhaul of something. And you don't want to do that because you're like, you'll feel uncomfortable in something new, or something will change and you'll be uncomfortable. Of course, the other side is like, oh, just fucking tear it down. It's like, where are you going to sleep tonight? Like there has to
Right.
be like a way of fixing the thing while also maintaining, you know, life as it is. Because like if you're just like, oh, let's just get rid of all gas-powered vehicles, it's not going to work. You know, like, oh, that into that story about changing that bolt on my tractor,
Mhm.
I couldn't do it myself because the wrench, the compressor I have was only like to a certain pressure. And this guy that came over to help me with it, he had a compressor on the back of his truck that ran on gas. He's like, it can do fucking anything.
Mm.
Like you could fix like a semi truck, whatever you need to do pressure wise, it will do it. But like my compressor, it's like I plug it into the wall, it charges up, right? So like he has a gas powered one, he can take it anywhere. So like if you're just like get rid of all gasoline, like I'm kind of fucked. You see what I mean? Like the idea that you could just let it all fall apart, tear it down, people are going to suffer even more.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, the like where people go and they have kids and then they get divorced, like the kids suffer. It's like you just fucking took the floor out from underneath them. Instead of like you doing the work of let me actually focus and rebuild this. And that's kind of where we're at right now. There's so many people who are like, let's just divorce left and right and have a national divorce. And just like, it's like, that's not acceptable. How many people are going to suffer because of that?
Yeah.
We have like our world right now, the systems, the governments, the political systems, the politics, everything needs to do what people in our group have done, which is like their marriage is over. It's like they're fucking done with each other. And then they're like, you know what? I'm going to use these tools and I'm going to rebuild within myself and with this relationship based on principles, because it was never based on anything real. So if I'm angry at the other person, it's because neither one of us had any fucking principles to begin with. So why would I be angry with them? Like imagine, how can you say like, I just can't work it out with this person?
Yeah.
That's like you're not willing to forgive yourself of some memories, some feelings that you either didn't get or want.
That's so great. Like, because we were listening to The Willingness to Forgive yesterday, and it was basically that point of um like there's the two extremes, right? Of one, not wanting to let go of a relationship or an agreement, rather, just because like the idea is like, oh no, we have to hold on to this agreement, right? And then the other extreme being like not actually holding on to your agreement, and being self-honest about what's going on in the relationship, and actually like holding yourself accountable, so to speak. And in either case, you're not actually walking together as equals, right? But the point was brought up of when you're unwilling to be self-honest, it's because you're holding on to something in your past that you want to be right about. Like something happened where you want to be right about, and so you're being self-righteous. And like it's really interesting because that's like something that a lot of people today, even just walking their process, like they're unwilling to look at something and be like, oh, okay, this happened and I was wrong about that. I misjudged it or whatever. And just being like honest about it with themselves, so that they can move on to, because they'd rather hold on to like memories rather than and I think that's really like, if you could say in your mind, if there's like this,
The reality of it is you can't let go if you don't use the tools.
right,
And Techno Tutor is a critical point within it, because I've seen so many people where they try to do self-forgiveness, but they always hit a block when it gets to a certain point. And it's just like, no, that's just who I am.
right.
And it's like because you've hit the limit of what you can change your mind about just with the vocabulary you have, and like the definitions you have and the feelings you have towards words, and those feelings are stuck in those words. And so like you can't
Yes.
change because you're like, I have to feel this way. It's who I am, because that is the definition of yourself.
And on top of that, it's like going back to that preoccupation point. It's like your mind is so preoccupied because you've hit that limit. It is completely preoccupied with trying to juggle all these different things within your mind of like, this is part of my personality. This is like how I understand this word to mean. And this person said this to that person. And you hold on to this memory. And another good point that was brought up was trying to process the information and take it to knowledge, right? And so when you're taking information in and you're bringing it to knowledge, and you're using that as, okay, here's what I'm going to interact off of, you're basically using a memory of how you interpreted this in that moment. And instead of actually being present and speaking like from actual understanding and information, like, you know, basically the motion of the understanding, right? But instead of speaking from information, you're speaking from a memory of how you perceived it. And so you're again being you're deceiving yourself, right? But I was bringing up that point specifically because it's within the your ability to understand everything around you needs to be expanded, because you will reach that limit of everything that you can juggle within your mind, which is basically like the same thing as I really like the example of using math. Like when you get to algebra, and beyond algebra, now you've got geometry. And so now you're using everything that you learned in algebra to do geometry. But if you just started with some geometry that you didn't understand in elementary, you're not going to be able to do any of the math. It's just going to be like, you're going to get there and you're like, I don't think that's possible, right? And so you have to develop all the pieces to get to there, meaning you have to expand your vocabulary in math specifically in order to get to that point. In the same way, you have to expand your understanding of yourself, the words that you're using, because the words that you're using maybe you were told as a kid when somebody disagrees with you, or when you disagreed with your parents, that you were just being rude, right? And so because of that, then you can't even understand that you can disagree with somebody and talk it out without having a fight, or without needing to be defensive, or without having to justify or whatever. Like you can just actually get on the same page. And I'm bringing in all this context to say, you have to expand so much, because it's like, otherwise it's kind of like how you just described the conservatives and the liberals, like wanting to feel comfortable with who you are versus having this new experience. And that's not to say you have to only just be open to all the new experiences, and then next thing you know, you're like hooked up to the metaverse and something's ramming up your butthole.
Right.
But
I
rather
need more RAM.
but rather like expanding, actually evolving. This is actually evolving you as a being to be able to take in all this information and not be overwhelmed by the information to the point where you just bunker down and just say, nope, okay, that's it. That's all I can take. And this is
Yeah.
who I am.
You know what they're missing on the liberal side is it's investigate all things.
And keep
And
what's
that's where
best.
that's where they
Because,
stop.
yeah.
Right.
They don't
that
go,
which
but
is
what's
good.
actually best from?
Right.
The conservatives don't want to investigate anything new.
Right. It's like, okay, it's like this. It's
They're
like,
because they're actually the ultimate skeptics. Because they're like,
yeah,
I already know everything. So anything new, it's bullshit. They've already made the judgment. So hey, if you want a world where everybody has what they need, it's communism.
okay. Look. It's like this. It's like you've got a wall. And on the conservative side, it's like, we don't want to let in any pollutants into this water or whatever you have on the other side. So they have a wall, right? On the liberal side, it's like, we need new, fuel or whatever it is, but they let in everything without a filtration, right? And like the actual necessary thing is, you got to let in the necessary things and keep out the things that are not necessary. That's what you have to become. That's the network. Think of like a filtration system, how it's like, okay, it lets this in, it doesn't let that in. It's a network of different mediums in order to actually produce the best result. That's what you have to build within yourself, is that network of information, a network of understanding, network of vocabulary, network of like who you are and what this world is and how you best interact with it to actually have the best results, to actually live. Because if you're not being your best, then you're being selfish. That's really what it comes down to. If you're not actually being your best, you're being extremely fucking selfish, because you're not producing the best result for everyone else here on this planet. You're
And it's not just that judging the word selfish, it's that you're only considering yourself.
Yeah.
But the problem is you've defined yourself in a very limited way, which means lots of things that actually affect you get undirected.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to be directed based on your starting point, with everyone else being only focused on themselves. So of course the Illuminati, or who the fuck you want to call it, is going to be like, I give a shit about you. I care about myself just like you do.
Right.
So I'm going to do whatever I want. And you're not taking the responsibility for the things I'm doing, and you're allowing me to do whatever I want. And so who's that ultimately going to affect?
Everyone.
You. Right. Because and now that's why, even if you live in the first world, you're seeing everything collapse, because it has to. And if you're a Christian, I mean, that's what Jesus said he was going to do, isn't it? He was going to pit. The way he said it was something like, he's there to create conflict between mother and father, or husband and wife, and brother and sister, or father and daughter, or whatever. He's there to create conflict, meaning the principle of what is best for all is going to create conflict in the world, and things that are not based on those principles are going to collapse, not because of some magical force, but because by definition, they're going to. It's like, if you have a house and there is a problem in the foundation, eventually there will be a problem in the house. There's no magical force other than just the mechanics of how reality works that's going to cause that house to collapse or have problems. So in order to deal with the consequences that we have, and to prevent consequences in the future, That's why each of us has to take this point on and support ourselves to change, not with the belief that just because I'm changing, the world magically changes, but because I'm changing, I'm therefore able to support others, which grows a community, which allows communities to come together around the world, which then grows and grows and grows. And as the systems collapse, I mean, if they collapse completely, we're all fucked. But as you're witnessing the collapse, there will be more and more people who will question things. And as you do, we accumulate people who kind of start to get it, and they start supporting themselves and they support other people. And then we create a group of people who can actually go and take responsibility for the things that the average person right now is. You don't even need, like, think about it. What percentage of the world is being run by the elite? I'm sorry, what I meant to say was, what percentage of the world is being run? What percentage of people is running the world is what I mean. It's
Oh,
a very
yeah.
small percentage. It's just everyone else just allowing it.
Yeah.
So they're just allowing whatever anyways. You have the new 1% who goes and changes the systems and then supports everyone to understand why that's necessary. And that will create, you can create a point where you alleviate survival pressure off everyone so they can then walk the process themselves. It takes generations, but then eventually you have a world where people are supported to raise up their vocabulary, their education level. So then when you talk about everyone has an equal opportunity, they actually will. And you won't have to worry about equal outcome. The only thing you'd be worried about equal outcome is if somebody doesn't have enough food, you'd be like, well, this must be something wrong in the way we've designed the supply chain, or something happened, or there was an accident or something.
Yeah.
But like, imagine if we had a world where the way people thought about it is, of course, everyone has enough to eat. There's something wrong if everyone does it. You see, but that world only will work in the context where everyone is raised up to a high standard of education, not the opposite way around. Right? Do you have any closing thoughts? Anybody?
I think that was pretty good.
Pretty good?
close.
All right. So we'll see everybody on the next podcast next week, but also Friday night hangouts. We've got our exclusive parenting and women's groups and men's groups, health leaders, and I mean, a lot of stuff. So join the group. If you're on the fence, don't be on the fence. That's a very uncomfortable position to be on. All right. No matter which way you go, just get off the fence and then reach out to somebody about TechnoTutor, and we'll be here to support. So otherwise, we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Bye.